Are we on now?
We are.
Awesome. Hello and welcome everyone to the second live stream session. Obviously, I'm used to being purely on audio because of the podcast. And you might be able to hear in my voice that I was up until like 11 o'clock last night at a karaoke place. So my throat's all weird.
I forgot your country's actually open. That must be very nice.
We are allowed to go outside. So again, this would be a great benefit of a global effort. We'd all be able to do things at the same time and work together. But at the moment, it's only Australia that, well, among a few other countries, that has gotten rid of COVID more or less. So we just have these little lockdowns. So yeah, we're allowed to go outside and do things. But we were locked inside in Melbourne for like 3.5 months or 4 months. But we did get rid of it.
Very nice. I have been in this room for more than 9 months now, I think. So,
wow. Because you're in New York.
Yes. I'm just outside. I was in Manhattan, and then I had to basically evacuate once the pandemic hit. So I'm at my parents' house just outside the city.
Yeah.
That's where I've been for almost a year now. It's crazy that we're coming up on a year.
Yeah.
That is wild to me.
It's all right. Everyone will just pretend 2020 is the year that didn't really happen. It can just be this block that's like, no, it's not real. Don't worry about it. So yeah, I know we are meant to be talking about campaigns and chapters and activism, which is great because obviously you are the one that talks to most of the chapters.
Yes.
But at the same time, I think this whole World Federalist movement, the Young World Federalists, was all started really with the intention, and me and Nick started it, but we've sort of stepped back, and now it's more Eston and a group of others, so Andy and Charles and all that are running it, because I am now more of a personality talking on the podcast and so on, but that's fine by me because I have so many other things to do at once. But the whole point of starting the YWF to begin with was really to be this new force of activism. Like that's kind of the point, because the thing is the older organizations were really good at certain things, but there was a huge sort of section of sort of popular activism that they weren't quite sure how to deal with. So that's exactly what we're all here for, and I'm glad to see it's all growing. And now we have a live stream and all these other fancy things. So I mean, Liam, is there anything about sorry, it is early in the morning for me. My brain is slowly turning on. About the chapters that you want to talk about, because I haven't spoken to chapter heads or the chapter guys in a while.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's coming out of the holidays, so we have all been a little bit inactive the last few weeks. I'm actually just finished up a job, so I'm coming. Lots going on in my life too. I think there's a lot going on in everyone's lives, but. With that said, it is stunning, like what we've actually gotten done the last few months through this whole pandemic. I started with you guys like in March. You guys asked me for like just as this was starting, so I only know pandemic, Young World Federalists. This is the only state I know us in. But we have had.
I guess the thing is, we were so young before that there wasn't a lot happening anyway. So it's like we are a quarantine organization in so many ways.
Essentially, I mean, it's funny, like. We had to use the tools that now everyone else is using anyway. You know, like we'd have to be using Zoom regardless, just because we're all spread out. But
and we always had the wacky times.
Yeah.
So for everyone listening, if you're trying to organize regular calls between like both sides of the US, the EU, and Australia at once, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yes.
Like no time slot is ever really good. Like they're all just less bad than another one.
Someone has to suffer every time, no question.
No, exactly. But that's I don't mind it being.
And it's usually either the Australians or the Americans. It's one.
The European privilege. That's what it is. But no, I think that's the thing, right? Is like we're all coming back, and everyone sort of faded off into nothing for a bit because of the holidays, and now obviously, you know, things are kind of going back to normal. Work schedules are going back to normal. Normal. Everyone's stuck at home, but if anything, I mean, to your point, that kind of works well for us because everyone being stuck at home, it's meant that we've sort of been able to talk to everyone equally.
Right.
because, you know, everyone is just stuck on computers with Zoom and stuff. So it's like, you know, they can join our meetings, join the Discord, do all that sort of stuff. It's been pretty even. And that to the point of activism again, that's really been a good thing at the moment. So anyone out there that's sort of listening or paying attention to this kind of thing, you can see that, oh, John, you have actually made it. Anyone who is actually paying attention to this sort of thing can get involved really easily because we're all stuck online and we're all equal. Like, it's a very equal playing field at the moment. So jump on the Discord and talk to us if you're watching this.
Everyone knows how to engage with that and has been engaging with, you know, Discord and Zoom, you know. So it's very intuitive for them to join in this process.
And it's so equal. I mean, I make this point a few times when we were having the early conversations with the WFM and trying to organize like how they were sorting things out globally. Because we had a guy who joined us who was in some village in Bulgaria, and I don't even know a WFM organization that would suit him. Like, who would he join, sort of thing. So this is sort of like where all the importance of embracing individuals and this kind of level playing field is working really well in our favor. Hold on. People are sending me questions. John, you can introduce yourself if you want. I don't know if you were on both sessions or not. Were you on the other one?
No, I wasn't on the other session. No, and my internet suppliers had a major outage in the UK, so I'm working off the mobile signal, which is pretty weak where I am. So we'll see how it works.
Everyone who's watching, as you can tell, John is not a young World Federalist, but he is a World Federalist who works with us.
Yeah, I don't know where Daniel gets that impression from. Anyway, I'm trying to master this technology here. So yeah, I work as an advisor to the Young World Federalists, which I've been doing for a year now, and I also work with an outfit called Democracy Without Borders, which runs the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly campaign, which we might come to at some point. And I work with an outfit called the One World Trust in the UK, which is a World Federalist organization. And technically, I am the chair of the Transnational Working Group for Communications and Outreach for the World Federalist Movement. So one of my themes working for all these organizations is trying to integrate the wider movement and operate more as one unit.
Well, that plays well into our theme of activism and campaigns, because that's where all the advantage comes from if you're working together. Because, you know, obviously, if I'm doing something and you can really easily compare it to something that you're doing over in your country or somewhere else, it creates that harmonized sort of global brand. And then it makes it a much stronger approach, because then people can see it and say, oh, hey, you know, there's this global thing going on. People are actually trying to get this to happen. It's not just this little wacko and that little nut job and whatever it is. There's a commonality. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the first question that Eston has asked me, which is, how can we be World Federalist activists? Which is an interesting question, very broad, but I think one of the big things has been the whole point for me to do with approaching this as like a media endeavor, in terms of really embracing making video and online content. This is a perfect example. This is exactly what we're talking about. This kind of stuff with the live stream is because this is the side that hasn't been covered historically. Like, they've been very good at one form of marketing and activism, but this sort of online videos, stuff people can absorb and be a part of, communities, that kind of stuff. I think this is really effective at getting the word out there, because the big thing we're trying to separate here is that it's not just like the environment where you come out and say, stop global warming, because everyone knows what global warming is. We can't do that. What we have to say is, you know, here's World Federalism, and it's good.
Well, I was going to say it's educational more than anything at this stage.
Exactly. Yeah. Good
but
point.
That's exactly what the example I was going to make, which is like, oh, we need to like stop hunger. We need to make sure people have water. Those are very self-explanatory. Like, to talk about World Federalism, you have to kind of teach, you know, someone a little bit about history, some about world politics that not everyone knows, you know, like, so it takes a little bit, but that's also kind of the fun of it and kind of the honor of it.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Because we get to tell people like it's a really important responsibility, because we get to tell people not only does world federalism exist, but as you said, it's not just like wackos thinking about it. There is a really rich history. There's a lot of great stories attached to this too. I mean,
yeah,
it's really something.
Yeah, I mean, for everyone curious, this goes back to 1947. So it's a long thing. And the organizations involved have actually spanned that time. Not the YWF, obviously, but some of the older ones.
Yeah, and it also goes back to ancient Greece if you want to look into the history of cosmopolitan thinking. And I've always been under the impression. Well, I was going to say, and talking about how you need to explain and that it's educational. To me, it's perfectly self-evident what more effective and accountable global governance is, and what a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly would be. These things I feel are intuitive to most people. So that's perhaps why the movement hasn't got mass support around the world so far.
I think a lot of it, it's intuitive if you really understand the underlying stuff that's sort of happening, like how the pressures and the systems sort of interact. But I think you need to have a reasonable level of, I don't know, education in those areas to know it. Whereas I think a lot of people have a level that's below that. So you're inevitably having to explain something in it. Like, even if they understand half of it, you're explaining the other half or something. And the thing is, the big challenge is doing that without making them incredibly bored.
Yeah. I think my /S wasn't maybe very apparent there.
Ah, okay. No, it wasn't. Even in video, John. Come on, video's usually meant to the crutch for sarcasm. That's how.
Yeah.
I would say there are kind of two parts to it, right? There is the, I guess, more self-evident, more emotional. Yes, like humanity is one, and that is something that I think does come naturally to a lot of people. But then the other half is the political side, the actual mechanisms of making global democracy happen. And obviously that's very difficult. But nowadays, I think what makes it a lot easier is that first part, that are we all connected? Do we all have this common stake, is completely self-evident to most people. Anyone who lives in a country or has access to the internet has access to these things, especially younger people. There's no question. I think for my younger sisters on TikTok or whatever, if they can see all of these things from all these different perspectives that you get from TikTok. That's not to plug TikTok in any way, but you are seeing pieces of people's day from everywhere, and I think that
does
have an effect on like a generation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, go, John.
Just because we all know we're connected, which people do, doesn't mean we all have the same political views. So you can, in the same connected world, you have a bunch of nationalists and of various stripes. So the coming together doesn't automatically follow, I don't feel.
And what I've seen is this weird thing where you have like UK Trumpists arguing with American left-wing people. And it's like the world is just insane. But that's the point, right? Isn't it? It's like these views. And that's actually, honestly, that's probably a really good thing for us, because the thing is, it means that and I think we just lost John, but that's fine. But the ideologies and the views and the experiences are becoming so transnational, right? That you can have those weird situations happening. And because they're so weird, that's because our systems don't make sense anymore, right? The natural reality is turning into something else of like international accord, commonality across the globe, that kind of thing, that common interconnectivity. But the systems that we live in make it weird, because we're still very national in the way that we structure everything, and nothing exists besides that. So yeah, it's weird, but it's not at the same time.
Sorry, I dropped off for a second there. Are we still discussing how to be an activist in world federalism?
Probably not. I think we've got off topic.
But
we sort of are.
But on that, because I dropped off for a moment. I missed what you were saying. But I mean, on the topic of being an activist, I find that a very interesting question, particularly for the young World Federalists, because a lot of the existing World Federalist organizations have been around for a long time. They've been active and they know what they do, and they have campaigns and they pursue them. Whereas the young World Federalists, from that perspective, are the new kids on the block. And there's less clarity as to what one can actually do to be active. And certainly the focus of the young World Federalists to date has been to grow awareness, understanding, support, for the movement to get more people on board, which absolutely makes sense. And the established organizations all need more of a mass movement to make anything happen, because politicians can't move until there's a level of popular support and understanding. But having said that, there's a lot people can do if people are motivated to take political action. There's a lot of very concrete campaigns out there that can be supported. You can, talk to your MP, you can talk to all sorts of people. So there's a lot that can be done for activism towards world federalism.
I think the big thing the big first thing that really needs to happen, and I've harped on about this before, is that there has to be, like me and like Nick and like Liam and like Eston, like there's a whole lot of people, I think, who already believe this is the case, right? And I think we need to go really hard on getting all of those people together, because the thing is, I think honestly out in the globe, there's got to be hundreds of thousands of young people who think and sit in the same mentality that we sit in, because it seems so common and we find them everywhere we go looking. And so what you really want to do before you spend all your effort going after a campaign with however many you already have is get as many people as possible into the community through a concerted effort, which is like through a common campaign, through a big common effort between all the World Federalist movements to get people in, because everywhere we post, there's at least a couple of people who comment on whatever we post saying, I never heard of this. What is this? I want to get involved. And maybe some of them are really serious about getting involved and some of them just agree with us. But like that kind of thing is, I think, what we have to really drive, because if we can get a big chunk of that huge unknown quantity into the movement, then you can point them at campaigns. And I think it's about prioritizing effort, because obviously we're all part-time, we're all volunteers. We can only do one thing at a time. But I think if we're doing one thing, it's getting the rest of those people. And then it's exactly what we've been doing so far, just with more energy and more focus. And then we can do everything else.
So if an individual listening to this wants to take action towards world federalism in that direction, what should that individual be doing?
I think honestly, it's about advocation and content. But sorry, Liam, go ahead.
I would say just make an Instagram post, just letting people know world federalism exists. I mean, it's really that simple. Like, just kind of, tell two of your friends, have them tell two of your friends. I mean, just having people know, just as Dan said, just having people know about world federalism, I think will instantly activate a lot of people. Just to have, I would have been a world federalism activist, since I was, like a teenager if I had known it existed, but I didn't until, recently. So people knowing that this is a legitimate movement that, just brought on a few hundred people just this year alone. That's
I absolutely agree. I think at the moment, the main thing for us, especially in the YWF, is just getting new people. It's just getting as many of these people as you can, because and the same. When I was, I remember when I was like 15, 14, I was watching like sci-fi movies and stuff, and I'd just be like, this is exactly what I want. This is exactly what I want. What are we doing, kind of thing. And then my opinion never changed. It's just my education around the topic changed a lot over time. So ethically, you're kind of already there. It's just that you need to understand why and how it works, how it's possible. And that's sort of what happens when people come in, because they come into the Discord and they say, I'm interested, I want to know more, I don't really know much about this topic. And Andy doing a great job always spamming my video that I made about what is world federalism. So thank you, Andy. But it's really just about explaining to people once they come in, because ethically they're already there. Logically, they don't understand how the systems necessarily work.
The other thing that'd be really cool is people who are involved in related areas like climate movement, peace movement, international justice. Getting those people, if we can get those movements on board en masse, that will make the biggest difference to our impact.
Well, and it'd be so much easier when you have a lot of people, right? Like, it's like everything becomes easier when you have that big group already. And the thing is, we have a pretty good group, but we could honestly be a lot bigger and we'd have a lot more sway then.
Well, and when we should talk about, like, we have approached, like with Regen, approaching those organizations that are already active in their local politics or in their local, whatever activism. And yeah, exactly what you just said, letting them know about it. And at least in Regent's case, where they're already very invested in, green policies, it came very naturally to them, the embrace of federalism.
And again, that's something that works well from the ground up, from the youth level upwards, because I know if you're working for the top downs, a lot of those organizations, they can't technically take political viewpoints because of their funding, because of this, because of that, because of the other. Whereas that's really, I think, amenable to ground up youth movement.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think is like, obviously the thing is that everything is best working when there's multiple approaches. I think the kind of thing that, for instance, DWB is really good at, and Andreas is getting these people who are already really educated, really into the system already, like these people that have a lot of connections and are fantastic people to make contact with, because obviously they're the kind of people who are going to get you into things and make those campaigns when you're actually really behind them, they're actually going to get somewhere because you know the people. That's really good. I mean, that gives it somewhere to go. It's just that, I think the only place that we've really lacked that kind of energy historically is the inflow pipe sort of thing, which is getting the people to put pressure on the campaigns so that then the people that you know that you've made contact with can say, look, giant group of people want something. Let's go do it. Which is something you've talked about before, John, about getting like a big group of people behind something. Like a huge number of people signed off to a petition or something. So we can say, look, you have all these people behind this campaign. Can
you imagine if, like a COP, we had a huge number of people at the environmental COP 26 that's happening later this year in the UK. You had a huge number of people there demanding that we had a world parliament, for example. It'd be fantastic. And that's where, that's a solution to it. I came into this from the environment. Obviously, you can't solve global environmental issues by having competing nation states arguing about who's going to start. Obviously, you need to have better global governance. And it frustrates the hell out of me that the environment movement isn't automatically on board with us. They want to plant trees or whatever, which is great. I've got nothing against planting trees. But you don't solve climate change by loving each other very much. You do it by imposing rules, imposing attacks, having global governance that works. And that's what people should be demanding at COP.
Yeah, and go, Liam, go.
The mechanisms to actually change things. My first ever exposure to world federalism was through Democracy Without Borders, going to the People's Assembly at the United Nations, the last General Assembly they had before the pandemic. And there was a lot of other NGOs there with really important causes, and regardless of what they're asking for, the root of the problem always came down to accountability, or just the mechanisms to change those things just do not exist. Was repeatedly kind of what the problem boiled down to. And I mean, world federalism, as you just said, is the solution to all of that.
I think that one of the big reasons, like the environmental movement and groups like that, haven't really gotten behind this wholesale is because their brand's already kind of iffy a lot of the time, because like the people are constantly giving them crap for protests that go overboard or whatever it is. Like their brand's fragile in terms of like they're doing a lot of good, but the people they're involved with, they're constantly, I think, paranoid that they're going to be involved with an even bigger, like a big nutcase group or something, and it's going to get them in trouble. I think that's probably part of the reason, is because we've had all these little fragmented organizations and campaigns and not a lot of centralized weight or coordination or whatever behind it. It's not looked good from outside. And it's probably put them off, sort of like really wholesale jumping on board, even if maybe they agree. And I think, again, it's the sort of thing that's going to get solved by having a bigger group and a more consolidated effort and marketing brand and everything. So it looks like we're really put together. We really know what we're doing. We're really organized. There's a lot of us. And then it's not such a risk to ally yourself with it. So I think, again, almost every problem I can think of that sort of we have and we need to solve is just by bringing in people. And the easiest people are going to be those people that already agree with us. So like to Liam's point, the best thing you can do as a listener is just spam stuff on social media. Write blog articles. If you can get something into a local paper, like or a proper online article anything. Just get stuff out there so people realize that this exists and it's a thing, and they can join if they want to, because that's how we'll fish all those people out of the woodwork. And that's going to be the best thing for us in the long term.
And I will say, there was one thing that was missing before this, and that is just the times. It is more apparent than ever what the stakes are as far as human commonality is. No one can deny that anymore. With the influx of technology and the events that happen.
I mean, there's so many challenges with global warming, and then the challenges that are going to come in around automation, and the world is changing enormously. Enormously over the last couple of decades, and it's obviously going to keep changing more. And these issues, obviously, because of technology and the availability and how quick everything moves, and everyone's sort of part of the same problem. Not a problem, it's the factors that affect someone affect a lot of other people, a lot more than they would have historically. I remember there's something in Andreas's book, and I'm paraphrasing this because I cannot remember the exact writing.
Do you know the chapter?
I wish I could, but I absolutely don't. It's a third of the way in, if that helps. But basically, it's a section saying that historically democracies were designed for a constituency of people to elect a government to make decisions and have sovereignty over an area. So some country or some area or some group or whatever it is, and that way they can control all the things that affect them, because everything that affects them is in that thing. But then obviously global supply lines and international trade and global warming and just everything is becoming more and more intense, and the volumes are getting bigger, and everything's getting further out of the grasp of the nation. The fundamental building block of the country has changed. That fundamental building block of we elect our leaders and then they do things for us is not the case anymore. And I'm sorry, Andreas, this is a terrible paraphrase that I'm doing. Yours was much smarter sounding, but but basically it's that idea that we can't elect people to make decisions over us anymore. We don't have that power. The stuff that's really happening to us is happening at a level where there is no democratic accountability, which again is the whole point of the UNPA campaign.
Yeah, and that's why you get the left behind, because left behind doesn't matter which way they vote. Their country's government is kind of obliged to remain competitive in the global sphere. And when you've got a globalized economy, it's blindingly obvious you need globalized politics to manage it properly. And then you stop Amazon from paying their tax, you stop the left behind, etc., etc. And it's and what's so frustrating is that, to all of us in our bubble, it's so incredibly blindingly obvious. And yet it's just not part of the standard political discourse. And I guess it's not part of the standard political discourse because looking at realpolitik and Russia and China, and what are you going to do about Russia and China? And against that, you lay out climate change. And if you've got to, have a competition between climate change versus the politics in Russia and China, well, climate change is going to win sooner or later, but maybe at great expense to the rest of us.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a shame that we have to spend so much time explaining what square one is of world federalism, because but I guess that's the thing, right, is that we have to identify that, because as a movement of volunteers and people without a huge amount of time, we have to really figure out the thing we have to do next, and then the thing that comes after that kind of thing.
No, I kind of think in a way we can overdo this, how hard it is to explain stuff as well. I mean, when I was being sarcastic earlier and saying United Nations Parliamentary Assembly and more effective and accountable global governance, those are huge mouthfuls which are gobbledygook, and I accept that. But to say, hey, look, do you know how the United States works, roughly speaking? They got states and they got a federal government, and that's how it runs. Well, we ought to run the planet that way. And it's kind of stupid that we're still at the early United States stage, which didn't work, where all the nations run themselves and there's no one to tell them what to do. And, it's, at that level, it's completely obvious what we're trying to do. And then it's obvious it would work, because it's how all, most big diverse countries are run this way anyway. So obviously,
I have said that to people before, and you would be surprised the objections they come out with, which is usually things like, oh, but then China will have power of us because they'll have more votes, or they'll, or suddenly everyone will migrate to my neighborhood or something. It's general fears like that.
And then you come eventually to nationalism and the pure race, because I mean, if the Asians make up 60% of the global population, and ultimately it should be one person, one vote, not tomorrow, but that is the only fair way to go in the long term, one person, one vote. If 60% of the population is, over 5'6", or, Asian or whatever it may be, well, then they're going to have 60% of the votes. And then if we object to that, well, on what basis? That sounds pretty sort of neo-colonial.
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly. And so, like, you end up in this weird middle ground conversation where you're not exactly explaining world federalism anymore. You're trying to disprove racism. It's kind of like, which is on endless fun, obviously. But
I know from research in the UK, the people who most strongly object, and the most racist people, the people who are most xenophobic in the UK, are those who have the least foreign people in that area. So as soon as you're exposed to foreign people, hey presto, you discover their people, and then the problem goes away.
Yeah, no, I remember reading something that said that if you've never gone overseas, you're like far more likely to be a member of like a far right political party or something.
I mean, it's no secret here in America. It's the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of the interesting thing about Australia is that like we have the vast majority of the population is in like a few cities. And obviously cities by their very nature have a lot of people from all over the world. Like everyone comes and stays there, but it's kind of like you get to a certain point and then you're the outer metropolitan maybe, and then the regions, and then it really starts to spike up really quickly. But it's the smaller part of the population because of the cities. So we don't really have the America-England situation. Like when I used to live in England, I remember that. It's like, it's really interesting because you're driving through the country and it's just kind of like town. It's just this non-stop urbanization with gaps constantly. I don't know. It's weird. Or Australia.
I've never thought about it that way. And you would notice that difference. That's interesting.
You drive, it is just non-stop small towns. It's weird. Whereas in Australia, it's kind of like gigantic city, and then you leave the city, and you have a town, and then you have like an hour drive, and then there's another town, and then there's an hour drive.
No, I mean that's right. When I went to Australia, I thought, finally I've arrived in normality. I can drive for 3,000 miles, and it's all desert. And I thought, of course, this is how it should be.
And that is how it feels if you drive from Perth to Melbourne. It's absolutely ridiculous. I did have a friend who did that drive, and I don't really want to because there's like nothing there.
Actually called them in America. They call them edge cities, and especially since the 80s, especially since the Reagan times, a lot of housing developments in America have been very samey. Development of any kind, commercial housing, past the point, and especially outside of any like middle-sized city. There'll just be miles and miles of towns that are essentially indistinguishable from each other as far as like architecture goes. And it's actually been a big struggle as far as like community wise. As far as community building in America goes, is because like your town doesn't really have limits. There's no like, here's your town and then something in between and then another town. It's just town, all butting up against each other, and they all kind of look the same. And I think that's why a lot of people have become very detached from like democracy on a ground level in America over the last few decades, is because that is not, I think, I don't know, a soulfully fulfilling environment for a lot of people. I mean, where the opioid epidemic started are areas like that were built up in these like periods of industrialization that no longer, have that anymore. Not even just industrialization, not factory jobs, any kind of jobs for the most part.
It's the same in Australia. Like the country towns we do have a lot of them. It's just that the majority of the population is in the cities. But the thing is, it's the meth epidemic and ice. So meth and ice are the big problem we have, getting spooked by like gangs and stuff all throughout the empty parts. But it's created a very different Australia between country Australia and city. It's just like America. But the thing is, we don't have the population heaviness and like the states the way you guys have them, where you have all these states through the middle that are kind of a lot of that stuff. Ours is more like there's a major city that dominates sort of every state. All right, I'm going to ask you guys some interesting other things that Eston sent me within this last period we have. So the first thing he asked, and these are good points to focus on, is protest a good method? It's funny. I did a podcast episode on this with Luca, and we sort of talked about the history of protest and all those kinds of things, and how like it is and it isn't. But you kind of really need to know what you're asking for, otherwise it kind of just becomes an outpouring of anger. Sort of like it's kind of like the problem that Occupy had. Occupy was sort of just a frustration with everything at once. So it was hard for them to articulate a single sort of concise set of requirements. So that there were some in there, it kind of got drowned out by so much stuff going on at once. And I think protest is good. You just need to know what you're asking for. And again, I think that comes back to the other thing I was saying, that we need people. We need to get the people so we can get the protest kickstarted. So it's not just a couple of us, but there's a huge number of us. The credit to Nick still. You did your protest in front of the UN with Liam. Actually, Liam, you were there. You can talk about it.
Yeah, so we have had one on the Boots Young World Federalist event. We went in front of the United Nations in Manhattan and just passed out pamphlets. So there's about 4 or 5 people, which, with COVID, in Manhattan, it's still bad. So that you wouldn't want more than that. But it was great just to stand there and hand out pamphlets. And
but
people,
you did get an ambassador, didn't you?
So yeah, so there were people leaving work that day, like people leaving the UN, and so yeah, there were diplomats, and I don't know if maybe there was an ambassador. I think Nick was the real star at handing out pamphlets that day. So
he said something about there being a Jamaican ambassador that he handed something and had a chat to or something.
That makes sense. Yeah, that probably happened.
Maybe we can become really big in Jamaica. That'd be good.
that'd be phenomenal. Definitely.
Actually, while I remember this point, when we first started looking for people, and this sort of keys into the activism growing thing sort of angle, is like when we first started looking for people, we were talking to all the people joining the Discord, and we were saying to them, "Hey guys, where are you all located?" Like, because we wanted to sort of figure out where the clusters were, so we could sort of maybe make little chapters or something like that. Because that's the thing, you just throw the line out into the internet and you find people and you try and put them together. But there was this couple or group of guys, and they were all in the same part of Kansas City. And it's like, I love that. It's like they were like a block apart or something, and they went to 2 different schools, but they knew exactly where each other lived, sort of thing, based on the information. And it's like, that's exactly what happens, right? You get these people, you pour them in, and they're near each other occasionally. And when they are near each other, they can do activities somewhere. Like you can say, okay, can you guys go and do this thing? And the more and more people you have in a little cluster, the easier and easier it is. And obviously, places like New York, I mean, I figure there'd be quite a lot of people who might be in favor of this kind of thing. And we could all throw them together with you, Liam, and, stuff can happen. Which
Absolutely.
Would be awesome.
But, also what we're kind of talking about is nowadays it actually doesn't really matter if you have a lot of people in one place. What I think we should be more focused on is having a lot of people in a lot of places. I mean, I think coming out of the pandemic, the most kind of powerful thing we could have happen is, as soon as it's viable, just have cities everywhere we have a chapter, just hand out with 4 or 5 people handing out pamphlets. Because now suddenly, Young World Federalism, it's not a lot of people marching down the street in Manhattan, but it's a movement that has people in some of the biggest cities in the world that are handing out pamphlets, and suddenly it's international and something that isn't just the our American or UK or Australian perspective.
Yeah, not just the local kids.
A couple of things I'd like to pick up on in this conversation. One is, Daniel, you said that we need to get the people before we have the protests, but that's chicken and egg, because you get the people by having the protests, so you get noticed. And
I think it's more the fact that I think we already have the people; they just don't know we're here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying is, if you want to attract attention to the movement, if you want to spread awareness, then having events that catch the eye of the media is a way to do it. And if any group of people is going to be able to do that, then youth would be a good bunch of people to do it, because a bunch of older people sitting around wondering what to do isn't so creative.
But that's the thing. I reckon it's just about what I want us to do. Really, is build a strategy around just getting these people that already agree with us, like the very narrow focus, because I think that number is much bigger than we think it is. In terms of the people that if you explain this to them, they'd very quickly go, "That sounds amazing. I've never heard of that. That's cool."
But you'll reach a lot of those people. if you get something, at a G8 or a G20 or a UN event, and you got some big banners up saying, Young World Federalist or whatever, then you get people's attention. They go and then they look it up. So it works both ways.
But that's the thing that I think the protest would want to be to the point of trying to get those people rather than talking about some obscure campaign angle, because that might lose them. Right. Yeah.
So I ought to... Liam, go.
Well, I would say that is one of the biggest questions we have facing us as an organization is, are we marching down the street saying, go World Federalism, or are we marching down the street saying, make a UNPA?
Okay, I've got a really strong opinion on this one. So I'm really keen on this big tent laser focus thing. So the big tent is, I have to stop the laser focus. To me, we all have to be about the objective, which is democratic world federalism, which may have nuances, but the basic picture is agreed, it's well defined, it's understandable. That is the goal. That is why we're not Occupy, because we don't want, being vegan is not our thing. What is our thing is democratic world federation. Now, then there are many routes to get there, and we know that. And part of the reason the wider movement is somewhat atomized is it's split into the different routes of getting there, which is fine, because you need people who are focused on the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly and other people who are focused on review of the UN Charter and so on and so forth. That's absolutely fine. What is missing is unifying this big tent of different approaches behind the common laser-focused goal of democratic world federalism.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's less, So I don't think you'd go down the street with maybe a specific campaign yet. I think what we'd be doing is we're trying to get the people to empower those campaigns when they happen. So if Andreas says, look, we're going to make a campaign to do with Thingo, and we've now got X number of people, we can throw these people behind them. Hold on. Yeah, so the global week of action that has just been put up on the screen. That is a good point. I think the global week of action is a really good campaign to rally around when it happens. The thing is, though, that what we want to do is we want to go all year. Like, rather than 1 week, it's about forming something that's sort of constantly producing content. Like, you look at Extinction, for instance. There's never a week that nothing comes out, right? Like, it's a constant flow of information. It's just that they might reach a fever pitch once a year. It's just that the rest of the year you need to be still going and forming the community, because otherwise it sort of fades away. You need that constant interaction, because that's what's happened with the Discord, right? Is people are on there now and they all know each other. You're kind of forming friendships, and when you form friendships, it's becoming a bit of your circle, your community. And then the thing is, then you're not going to disappear as soon as things slow down. If you get really campaign focused, I think as soon as things slow down, people get bored and they disappear, because there's nothing really else holding them. Yeah.
And both of these things are going on. Like, if you're walking down the street holding a placard, it's probably not going to say something arcane and technical, because no one's going to know what it means. It's going to say unite humanity, something along those lines. On the other hand, if one of the campaigns has got some activity scheduled, then they can call on the Young World Federalists and say, hey, can you guys all write a letter to so-and-so? And we can all do that as well. Yeah, which
touches on the other point that Eston was mentioning to me before, is that letter writing that is useful. In fact, what I would say is write letters to associated organizations, not just like, members of parliament or whatever. I don't think there's much they can do yet. But the thing is, what you can do is you can write letters and email to people who run other organizations. So other NGOs, other charities, other whatever, anyone that has anything sort of to do with what we might be talking about. Because then we can form networks from those connections, and they might start to talk to us.
And just in case your local member of parliament does want to do something, there is something they could do. They can sign up to the UNPA campaign, which is very specific, very political, and has 1,600 MPs around the world from 134 countries signed up right now.
Yeah, it's a very good campaign. I'm trying to read the random things that are getting sent.
I mean, the point is that there's a lot that can be done, at every different level. There's generic stuff you can do walking down the street with a placard. There's technical stuff you can do advocating policy, etc. There's a lot to do.
I think, honestly, everything has a place. The thing is, you can use almost every strategy to great effect. I think the only thing that I want to hammer on, I did before, really, is that basically I just want it to be focused around getting these people in that already exist, like just finding them and pulling them into the movement so that we can do things with them. Because I think we've got tons of good ideas. Every World Federalist organization has tons of good ideas about what you could do with people if you had them. It's just that we don't have them yet, but they exist. So it's like, I think priority step one, first thing is just hammering these people. And then we can have so many more options about what we want to do to grow it and make it more legitimate in the eyes of the rest of the world. Because obviously, we're not going to be doing much to convince anyone that doesn't already agree with us. But there's so many people that do, that I think it's worth chasing them down.
And at some point, you may have the environment movement and the peace movement and the justice movement saying, you know what, guys, we need to run the planet better, and this is how we can do it. We got to run a big, diverse country. Let's run the planet that way. That is a perfectly plausible scenario.
Yeah. I mean,
and if this gets going, it could snowball so fast.
Yeah. It's like I've said before, actually, a lot of the progressive movement globally, so like the Progressive International, that sort of stuff, a lot of what they talk about is exactly the same. It's just that they haven't really articulated it properly yet. I think they're actually, in a lot of ways, that whole huge movement is articulating exactly what we're talking about. It's just that they haven't realized that's what they're saying yet. All they want to do is have this like internationalized, outward thinking, cooperative sort of government relationship between everyone where we all care for each other and work together. But they haven't called it anything. It's an ideology to them. And I think, and I've always said in these other videos that I've had, which is like, if the 21st century will belong to the people that can articulate that ideology, because all technology, all, ethics, everything, you can see the way it's trending with these big, huge groups, which is like almost a huge part of the left and parts of the right is this progressive international kind of thing. Even if they're a part of it, they think like that. If you could articulate it and say, this is World Federalism.
I was going to say it's completely a question of vocabulary.
Yeah.
It's incredible that we haven't had this vocabulary before. I mean, so much of the world the last 70 years has been built around these kinds of things.
Sorry, John, you tried to interrupt me like 5 times, so I feel like you should be allowed to talk.
That's fine. Let Liam talk. That's absolutely fine. I'll tell you after.
He seemed like he was finishing.
That's just what I'm saying is hopefully now, again, that's our educational job right now, is to give people the words to these feelings. Because again, a lot of people do feel this way. Some of these people even talk about some of these things, but they just don't know that there's this umbrella for it.
Yeah. And I want to come back on this Big Tent thing. When you use the word progressive, it always, because I've been, very painfully going through our policy document with Aston from our team, who would count himself as a progressive. So I'm always, as the old conservative guy here, resisting the progressive element. So the point is, you can be progressive and for world federalism, but you can certainly be conservative and for world federalism too, because if you believe, for example, that God created the earth and man, and it's up to humanity to look after the planet, then you can be a world federalist on that basis. There's lots of different ways of coming here. I mean, in very simple terms, to me, we're messing up the planet, to put it politely. And that's going to be disastrous for all of us, obviously. And you're saying that this century belongs to, the World Federalist believers, but it might belong to Gaia, who, reasserts herself and just trashes humanity and wipes us off because we're causing ourselves problems. And the only way for humanity to secure its future, and it's so obvious, the only way to do it is for us to come together and run the planet better. And of course, if you've got a species living on a planet that's floating around in space, you don't go and trash your own environment. It's unbelievably stupid. So
it is.
It's not a political viewpoint. It's a survival of humanity viewpoint. Of course, we should look after the planet better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not isolating anything to any particular ideology. I think what it is that I can see the correlation really strongly with them, and I can see how easy it's going to be to make the case. But I think the same thing can be said for some of the neoliberal groups and all that sort of stuff, where they're very, very this nationalist stuff is just getting in the way. Like it's just crap. Like I think there is a lot of different groups that you could correlate this to. And yeah, it's not that it belongs to the World Federalists necessarily. I think it just belongs to whoever can properly define this new ideology that seems to exist that no one's really called anything yet. Because you can see it everywhere with the way people talk and what they're writing, and this new sort of consensus that's sort of existing among people who are like, EU's great, yeah, you know, that kind of stuff. But then there's the whole group that says the EU's terrible. It's just that group is sort of across the globe, though. Like it's not just in the EU. There's people that think the same way in Australia. There's people who think the same way in the US. There's people who think the same way everywhere. And whoever can define this, whoever can call it something and properly articulate it so that people say, oh, yeah, I'm a that. That's going to be what carries through the 21st century, I think. Because it's sort of in opposition to this older mentality of every country for themselves. That kind of has a name, but the other one doesn't. Yeah.
I think certain things. Sorry, Liam, you go.
No, go ahead, John. You were trying first.
So certain things I think are universal, like Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You know, I don't approve of anyone who thinks it's okay to shut gay people off buildings. That's just a no-no for me. And having a say in who runs your country, that's a sort of basic human rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 21. And it's not okay to live in an autocracy or under a tyranny. That's not okay. So there's a couple of universal things there. But then within that, provided you respect these universal human rights, then if you want a strong national identity, then world federalism's the way to go, because you take all of the global stuff and you pass it up to global level, and the national issues are then left to the nations to run as they wish. And so, you know, you can make a case, I can make a case, the nationalists should want world federalism too, because then you can have diverse national cultures, because you're not all trying to deal with the global issues.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not like you got to explain everything at once really quickly so no one gets the wrong idea. That's done through just yelling it all at once.
I think it's the passion. It's democracy thought out to its greatest extent.
Yeah.
I think, just as you said, people should be able to control the things around them. And the world is one of those things that currently is not. That's on a complete chaotic runaway train.
Yeah. And then if you look at, you know, we started off, you know, on the pampas or wherever it was, on the savannah, and then we came up with agriculture, and we came into villages, and then once you're living in a village, you've got some governance issues you didn't have when you're living in a tribe, and so you have to sort those governance issues out, and then you find that the nearby town can trash your village, so the villages come together and make towns, and so you get the growth of the political unit. And it's been going on for millennia, and the size of the political unit grows in response to the external pressures. And now we have global pressures from the climate and the fact that we've got a global economy, so obviously it's the time that we need to step up to global governance.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's also the other. I mean, only people who are massive space nerds like me really care about this stuff. But I want to bring it up is that we have like 40-something space agencies across the world, and they're all trying to do exactly the same thing with different resources. I just want to raise that. How cool would it be if you had one?
Yeah. I'd just like to raise for anyone here on this call who's over, I don't know, 25 or 30. If you're anything like me, you would be astonished at the number of Star Trek fans there are amongst the young World Federalists.
I wore a Federation of Planets flag to our first thing at the UN.
Yeah.
The thing is, when I was a kid, my parents made this mistake: is they'd put the Thomas the Tank Engine tapes and the Star Trek tapes next to each other when we had VHS, and I would get confused because I was really young about which was which. And I'd put on the Star Trek one and then just commit. I was like, I don't know. I don't want to change it now. And I've just been that way ever since. But like between like the Halo games and Star Trek and everything, it's just we've formed this new generation that kind of thinks about this stuff, I think, maybe more than the older generation does. And it's more a part of our popular understanding or whatever. And I think that's a big part of why there's so many people that you could find that already believe in it. Maybe it is the same with you guys. I don't know. I know I can see it everywhere with people my age.
I mean, the generation before mine lived through the Second World War, and then obviously that was the height of the World Federalist movement after that, because nuclear weapons had been used, and people thought, you know what, we need some global regulation around this. Then we had a Cold War, at which point all sort of thought of World Federalism went out the window, and I guess that was my generation, and so it wasn't so prominent. Now we face global problems again and have more possibilities in global politics. It's coming back again, which is great. But I love the different reasons people become World Federalists.
Absolutely.
And despite having spoken to Daniel about this before, he is still the first person I've ever come across who's a World Federalist because his parents put the Star Trek next to Thomas the Tank Engine.
There was a flow on, but I reckon that was the first step. Getting me all primed up about space travel for a really young age. But yeah, look, that was part of it.
To go back to the first question, what's something someone could do right now to be a World Federalist activist? I would say go post the Hubble Deep Field, picture with all of the stars and the galaxies. That's, I think, what kind of did it for me. I remember when I first saw that photo, kind of thinking like, oh man, what the hell is this all about then? What are we fighting about? But something else you just said, I mean, easily my favorite part of being part of this so far is just whenever we do that, reach out to the person in Indonesia or Finland or Kansas City, because those are the three that I did in like 2 weeks. That when we helped get the chapter set up, it was Indonesia and then Kansas City and then Finland, and I thought that was the most beautiful mix of places you could kind of randomly think up. But seeing the adaptability of it is what's so interesting. When I'm talking to someone from Finland, I'm talking to someone from Indonesia, and we're talking about that localization, seeing how they can be so different in so many ways, but at the same time, again, get at that universality, and how we just kind of express that in different ways.
One of the really interesting ones is WFM Japan. I mean, they are a fascinating organization. Like, for anyone listening that doesn't know, they have like 10 people in parliament at least. There's a group of them that's officially sanctioned by their parliament that looks into world federalism, and there's like one guy who's really mastering it, and then there's the youth group, which is like 50 or 60 people. We're in contact with them already, but just like the way that they have functioned kind of in isolation, and the weird differences between the way that they embrace the values of it to other places and other countries, you can see it, that everyone can kind of see how this works and why it makes sense in their own way. But it's it's just about getting the message out there, and then you never know how people are going to say this works for me because of this, and then you probably have a whole new marketing angle because you found some new thing that you didn't think of because it's not applicable to you necessarily, but it might be applicable to another group. I've just been sent a reminder that it's 4 more minutes until we're done, so we've obviously had a very exciting time rambling through this for the last hour. I mean, I've had a good time, but I think to summarize all of my side, I guess we could run through a little summary each. Just to summarize my side, I think is that in terms of activism, we need, in my mind at the moment, the biggest thing we need is people, and I think there's lots of people who already agree with us. It's just about creating a concentrated effort or working on a concentrated strategy and effort to get those people in, so that then we can use their big swell of numbers to get the people who are progressively less sure. So really sure, get slightly less sure, get slightly less, until eventually we're working on whoever really doesn't think it's a good idea. And we just work down like that so that then we snowball. I think that's the most effective thing that we can do to move forward as activists. So everyone go and post wherever you can. Wherever you can, it'll help.
Exactly what you said. I mean, snowball is the key word there, I think. We're trying to get to that critical mass. And I think, I mean, I'm no expert on, making international social movements. This would be a lot easier if I was. But I'm really proud of everything, you guys have done over the last year. And I think, I don't know, it's a very strong start. At the very least, people are talking. We do have an Instagram presence about people talking about World Federalists, and that already is a very invaluable thing to have.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So, I mean, we need to find everybody who, even though they don't know it, they believe in democratic world federalism. We need to get them all working together behind that common goal, and we need to pull in the environment and the peace and the justice movements to work with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's only been like the young little Federalist side of this, which is this new sort of way that we've attacked it, has only existed for a year and a couple of months. Like, it's really not very long, but I mean, you see how much we've affected and how much we've touched. I really hope that by bringing these people on and continuing this influx of people, that this can just keep going and we can get bigger and bigger and bigger until we hit that point where we have so many people that we can just do in-person events. We can have big get-togethers. We can have and we can affect things. You can go and talk to other organizations and campaigns and really make a difference, get them to agree with us, sign on with us, all kinds of cool stuff.
And although it's only been a year, we don't have very long when you look at the wildfires we got going around the world and the rate the planet's changing. So it's urgent.
I don't know what you're talking about. Australia's fine. Oh man, it's smoke everywhere in the year, and now we've forgotten about it because COVID's honestly just made it like this thing that happened ages ago.
I know what you could do about COVID. You could have a World Federation.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. That's how we can solve all our problems at the moment. I don't know how we're meant to end this now. So Eston, you might need to end it, but I'm done. I've said my piece. We've been an hour. Thank you everyone for joining us. I see all these conversations that are happening down the side. I'm sorry we got so round up talking to each other. We haven't actually responded to everything, but it seems like you guys are talking to each other, which is really good to see. We really wanted people on and talking to each other and seeing what was going on. So, yeah, that's me out. I'm done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So thanks, guys.